you're all doing well. Here is part 2 of my attempt to explain, what my public-facing project really is. I did it terrible. I was under some time pressure, and I don't do really good under time pressure in class. And I kind of just, instead of actually doing justice to kind of my virtual museum, instead I just kind of was thinking out loud while going through and just saying what's important and what's not to present. But no, hopefully this, I can go into way more depth about this virtual museum, what it represents, what narratives does it tell, and how it can help students understand Mediterranean the Mediterranean history, and obviously the archaeological components of working with shipwrecks in a better, more interactive way. And that's basically the goal of this project. So yeah, without further ado, my my narrative that this public-facing project kind of represents surrounds a character named Magnus, who and his crewmates, as well as some of his some of the people part of, so Magnus, he is part of a resettlement community of Romans during the early 1st century CE in a region just north of the Bristol Channel, and so, in Warwickshire in England. And this resettlement community lives among some native tribes of the island of Britain at the time, specifically the Dubuni tribe in this narrative, but as well as the Silures, other Warwickshire kingdoms in Britain at the time. And so the shipwreck we found is obviously a fake shipwreck, in the sense that the ship, the historical context that we'll be explaining is 100% accurate, but the evidence to kind of support that is obviously fake. There was no shipwreck in real life that was found. Maybe there could be one, but I think you get the point. The shipwreck that we found, this kind of virtual museum goes through the sort of that evidence that we found, and how it helps to build this narrative as well as teach the historical context of, quite frankly, a region that doesn't really get a lot of attention when people discuss Mediterranean interaction. And this leads into the inspiration behind this, of course, was during the first half of the class we discussed a lot about interaction within the Mediterranean, and rightfully so. That's where all the exciting stuff is happening. But one of the things that stuck with me was around the 3rd, 4th century BCE. Pytheas, the famous explorer, was able to break through the Carthaginian blockade in the Strait of Gibraltar, and go around the bend to northwestern Europe, where he made amazing discoveries that obviously changed the course of how people thought about Europe at for centuries to come, before more expeditions were going there. And so I thought it's really interesting. It should get maybe a little more attention, and obviously I think it's really interesting just to see how these Mediterranean networks grew outside of just the Mediterranean region itself. And so as I said, this virtual museum is based on a narrative of the main character who we have on our ship, Magnus, member of the Roman resettlement community, works for the government, big contributor, obviously hardworking man, and his Roman crew members, Quintus, Aulus, and Titus. And obviously the journey that this narrative takes is not just the Romans. They have Welsh, Dubini princess. Dubini is the tribe that this resettlement community is right next to, and so they interact with them. They obviously have good relations with them. And one more thing to premise is that this is an era before conquest, before all of the violence and aggressive Roman tactics of 47 AD. When Romans were just getting arriving into the island of Britain, and so obviously there wasn't what we know a lot about Roman British interaction during this time was Emperor Claudius came in and basically just took over Britain. But this is obviously decades, and obviously it could extend to a century before this. And so at this point there were peaceful interactions. There were actually genuine interactions to coexist. Not that they didn't coexist after the conquest, but So yeah, without further ado, let's get started. So the museum opens up on a virtual space that I kind of try to make resemble a ship. You obviously have wooden floors and a wooden upper deck, and then this is supposed to like be the bottom of a hull. It's obviously not very, this doesn't really look like a ship, but maybe it kind of does. I don't know. That's for you to decide. But yeah, basically the region we're talking about, if you could see like the white kind of line here, I'm like circling the Welsh region right here. We're looking at like the bottom of it. That's where the Dobuni tribe and the Silures lived, and that's where the Roman resettlement community is. And obviously here's the Bristol channel, and that is where we found our shipwreck and all of the evidence that we are going to explain. Now the journey starts actually in Lugdunum, which was kind of the center of Gaul in the Roman Empire. So it doesn't start in Wales, it ends there. But yeah, we just wanted to focus on how Magnus, his crewmates, as well as the three princes that they took on the journey, the three Dobuni princes they went here because basically we found the historical context surrounding this era is that all these Roman resettlement communities, they had to work with the tribes and kingdoms that were already existing in Britain, and one part of the agreement was that these Roman kingdoms and the leaders, they knew that quite frankly it was advantageous to kind of engage with and build connections with the Roman Empire. And so they sent a lot of their youth leaders on these voyages that Romans that were living there made back to Rome to build connections, develop trading networks, etc. Because at this time, even though I'm not saying that these British kingdoms were definitely open to Romans come in, obviously not. No, it wasn't like that. It was that, okay, there are these small Roman resettlement communities. It looks like there is like some Roman naval ships around the English Channel, and the trade. There's no denying that Mediterranean trade was very, very likened by the elites of these kingdoms in Britain, and so in some ways it was advantageous, and they sent these young princes to with the Romans to foster these connections. So yeah, here's like an image of Wales, I guess we could start off with coinage. So one of the main findings in our shipwreck was both a large amount of Roman and native Dobuni coinage, and we'll get into the specifics about exactly how they were found because that's also important later. But so basically one of the reasons why they're in Lugdunum was because trade interaction of Romans and Britain were increasing during this time, and trade was not just tin anymore. It was way more than tin. Later we'll see mosaics, we'll see tableware, elite items as well. And it was very advantageous to have Roman coins instead of always using their native Dobuni or Warwickshire coinage, just because you're trading with Romans. Obviously Romans, for them it will be more beneficial to have Roman coins. These are the Roman coins, actually. The bottom ones are Roman, these are the native Dobuni coins. And so Gaul was the center, Lugdunum Lion was the center of minting and currency. It's, as many people know, it's way easier to and cheaper to trade for coinage or exchange currency at the source rather than secondhand, where you might have increased prices due to multiple sales of the coinage. And so we suspect that through the large amount of Roman coinage right over here, and very little remaining native Dobuni coinage that were found on the ship, we suspect that the part of the wreck or part of the journey was either through Lion or derived from it. So that is basically the premise of this. And also, we also see some We also see what else do we see? Yeah, I think that's good for now. Right. So before we go on to room 2, I just want to make sure you just saw me pick up that little token over there. It's basically part of the interactivity of this kind of virtual exhibit is to have like incentives for students and for people who are trying to learn about shipwrecks and the Mediterranean history at this time. And part of it is like kind of like having these tokens as like a checklist or like incentive to go through all of the realms instead of just going around, jumping around from anywhere, and like kind of flowing through this narrative. And I think like that's a just one of many ways that you could increase interactivity in this kind of space. And so yeah, we'll pick up the second one as well. So yeah, we're in 2 exhibits. So yeah, they sailed off, and obviously part of this journey, Lion is inland Europe, and so they had to make through river travel. And so the particular path, that they were making, was from Lion. They would take the Rhone River, we suspect, and then the Ari or some other river connections in France, and up into Germany, modern day Germany, where they would take the Rhine River up to the Northern Sea. And so, yeah, here's this kind of like maybe what their view looked like, or not. But yeah, so yeah, here's their ship. Okay, now the exciting stuff. So let's see, what else did we find in this shipwreck? Let me collect that token here. What else did they find in this shipwreck that we can maybe say something about? So we found Roman mosaics. One large Roman mosaic, and it's important to note that historically there was this one emperor in the southeast of Britain, King Tiberius Claudius Cogadubus. I think that's how you pronounce his last name. But he was ironically very anti-Roman. He kind of was against Roman conquest. Obviously, he didn't want to interact with Romans at all. But despite this, he was a big patronage of Roman art in Britain, and in his palaces and in his kind of he had a lot of Roman mosaics, and this particular one, as we could see a close up. Let's see. Yeah, there's a. This is a close up of Cupid on a horse, and then obviously if you look, there's like Pegasuses and kind of Roman vases, encircling this, but. Yeah, these Roman mosaics, a lot of elite members in these British kingdoms were very fond of, and so this was one of the main curators for this increased attraction for Britain to engage with the Romans. And yeah, this was also found on the ship, which suggests that even in southeast England and Wales, there may have been some liking to this Roman art and culture. Here is this is a statue we found at the front of the ship, and this is where religion comes in as well. Obviously we have Cupid, and we suggest that along these long voyages there would be extensive conversations, especially along the river when things can get a little bit boring between our Romans and our Dubini princes, about culture and about exchange and stuff like that. This is representing the goddess Kuda, the goddess of water. Obviously, we find that historically there were Romans were eager to extend their own religious interpretations to the Britons, and many times they would compare one god to another. So Kuda could often be compared to someone like Poseidon. Here we see Diana the huntress, very famous in both Celtic religion as well as Roman religion. And yeah, basically we find this statue in the front of the shipwreck, what we think is the front of the shipwreck. And this statue is important because I guess we could go in the next room now. Actually, no. Let's stay here for a little bit. coinage, we talked about coinage a little bit earlier, and so what we start to see is that when we found the coins, they were separated into two main groups, and part of what we want to do is kind of explain to young people the how we analyze these shipwrecks, and part of it in this exhibit would be like going over how the placement of the coinage is also important, and the distribution of it. We had a lot of coinage in one sector, but there was also a small amount of coinage residing nearby the Kuda statue, and what we suspect is that this was meant as a sort of offering, to be an intention of an offering to be given on the when they would return home. The Celtic tribes here, the Dobunis, the Silures, even though the Roman baths are what are famous, there was still a lot of mystic and religion, British religion surrounding hot springs at this time, which the Roman baths actually derive from. And Kuda as a water god, the Dobunis would have many wells, and fountains that they would pay homage to the Greek god, or their goddess Kuda. And so we suspect that the reason why they realized that they wanted to make an intention of like giving a small amount of money, in this case like probably like it represented like an offering for their protection throughout the sea travel. And this makes sense because it wasn't the whole bulk, it was a small part. Obviously if it was a big part, then it probably wouldn't be the case, but because obviously they went to Lyon for currency exchange, we suspect. And so this might be a possibility. Obviously there's no way to tell for sure exactly what, but there is other examples of distribution on the ship, which we'll get into later. But yeah, we just want to that's one thing we could kind of teach these students is like how distribution of archaeological materials kind of go about. But yeah, it wasn't just about conversation on this ship and Magnus telling all the young princes about his religion, and then vice versa. No, they had to do work too. And so a big part of the life on the sea along the rivers was especially on the rivers, right? In the Mediterranean Sea, you generally go in the same direction for a while. You don't really make a lot of twists and turns. But on a river, you're always constantly making turns, because you have to go wherever the river kind of leads you. It's not like a big body of water. It's like windy sometimes. And so there's a lot of wear and tear that goes, especially on the mast and the sail. And so, constantly, we suspect that, not only are the Roman crew, who are experienced, doing maintenance on the sail and kind of like, making sure the mast is, solid, but also teaching the Dobini princes as well. We also found that, the whole of the ship is a two-strake, is a double strake kind of, in a double strake structure. And so we often suspect, the rivers are obviously much, shallower than, an open ocean. And so, there may have been a lot of wear and tear that, could have occurred. They may have had to pull over sometimes and replace some of these strakes. Or just, if a lot of moisture, can build up and, cause these, wooden strakes to, become not as effective in keeping the water out, and so they may need to be replaced. And so that was also probably a common task, as we have evidence of some replacement and undoing of these strakes. So yeah, that's obviously a part of the life. And now as we head towards the end of this exhibit, obviously we're going to get more into the artifacts that we find. So we find a lot of tableware, just like we found coinage. We found a lot of tableware, and this just extends the idea that these British kingdoms were very, very invested in Roman culture and lifestyle at the time, or not invested, but they were, at least the elites were eager to this is just backing the evidence that we already know from historically that these elites were in they had a strong liking for Roman wear I don't know. How do you say like tableware? Whatever. Okay, so yeah, you also have wine drinking vessels. So yeah, obviously these are very high societal stuff, and so this is not probably for the common people, probably for elite. And we also didn't find it in bulk commodity, and so that's also a signal that it might just be for a small group of people. But yeah, going back into why they may be carrying this is because these tribes, as we see in Wales, some of them, like the southeast Kata, what's the name of it? I might have to look this up. The name, the Kaduveyani tribe. Yeah, try saying that 5 times fast. They were part of the southeastern group. Let me make clear who I'm talking about. These guys right over here, these were warring, people, very anti-Roman, and obviously at this time Romans try to avoid these people, and but even the Silures, you would see the Silures. Oh no, sorry, this is a Katuyuv, whatever their name is, the southeast. We'll just call them the southeastern tribe. These names are just very hard to say. This is a southeastern tribe, very anti-Roman, very difficult to interact with. Romans probably stayed away from them before the conquest. But even the Silures, which are depicted here, they were like warring people, and even though they weren't necessarily anti-Roman, it's not like they were like just automatically accepting to Romans, coming on. Even the Dubunis, like they had to make agreements with them, and like how to in helping the Romans that were resettling in this region to help them build these connections, and so what we see is that in order to coexist, you needed like gift exchange. You needed these kind of incentives, these kind of you needed to build these relationships which were like that kind of went both ways, in order to kind of tame the violence and to kind of promote coexistence. And that's what we see in like a lot of these wares, is that they're kind of tailoring it towards the elite of these Romans are, and obviously it's not on their own accord. The British kingdoms are also they desire these types of things. But yeah, basically you see kind of this progressing, is that you're obviously seeing the Romans kind of help in get whatever these kingdoms may like from the Roman Empire, whether it's tableware, whether it's coinage, just help them get assimilated to the advantageous aspects of the Romans being in Britain, just so that them being in Britain isn't like, it's like they're giving up something. Obviously they're giving up their land and their security for all we know, but like at least they're getting something out of it. So yeah, it's like that's how I guess a lot of like relationships throughout history work, right? But yeah, lastly, we get to the final shipwreck, and obviously went over this in class. Should probably hurry it up, but yeah, one important thing is that the last find one of the last finds we had was about a similar vessel to the Fiumicino 5, which was a small fishing boat which we found right next to the shipwreck, and we suspect that on the way home or after they docked or whenever the Dubunis, fishing in Britain in general was not very common, but obviously they did have, I guess, some fishing methods, and obviously I explained this more in my narrative, and obviously all the citations in there, but we suspect that there was the Bristol Channel is known for its like devious storms, and for those like Romans who may not at this time very early in their kind of presence in this region, they weren't used to like the Bristol Channel, and so they probably got caught up in a storm, or were out, didn't see a storm coming and went about fishing. As we saw some coins also float around this fishing vessel that were similar to the coins we found on the main wreck a few meters away, and so we suspect that perhaps they went fishing just to teach, because this is a very Roman uh, structure, a Roman. This is, oh man, this is like a Roman. Uh, this is like a basin where, and this is how Romans fish, because they wanted to, grill their fish fresh and whatever, and so basically, the Roman princes probably wanted to learn more about this, and so what we suspect is that a lot of Roman fishing was taking place in the channel during the early time, and so the main ship summoned one of these ships to show the princes the exact mechanism, and unfortunately they may have got caught up in a storm in the process and perished with all and aboard. More details on that in the narrative, but basically I just went into a little bit more detail here just to show the kind of progression of these runs, and how it could kind of be a little bit more interactive to go about it this way. And overall the main goal is just to make this make sense to young people interested in archaeology, maritime archaeology, how to analyze shipwrecks specifically. So ideally there would be like an archaeologist, a professor, a teacher, or just like an audio recording that perhaps when you go into each room, a new audio starts to go and or starts to run and explain the images, or in this case artifacts. In the thing, I didn't include any artifacts in this virtual museum, obviously. Using photogrammetry, that could definitely be an addition. Another addition, what else? Yeah, that's the main thing, is just like making more interactive, like maybe making like some games for kids to get involved with. One of idea I had, I just didn't have time to implement, was like with the coinage, like try maybe like a game to try to exchange currency, and if you're right, you get to move on to the next room, or if you're wrong, well, maybe that would discourage people from going, because it may be the less mathy students will not enjoy that, but you know what I mean, like just more interaction, I guess, with kind of this the archaeology and the kind of processes that were taking place. And this could be done with anything, not just obviously this fake shipwreck that never happened, but I think I mean, you can make, like, the thing, even though this is a fake shipwreck, you get a lot of like the historical processes that occurred during this time, and so I think that's another cool thing that you could do, is this, you could build something like this from any shipwrecks, real or not real, just to kind of explain Mediterranean history and archaeology, and how to analyze shipwrecks to students. So hopefully that made sense. This is way overboard, but this is hopefully this, at least this is more satisfying than what I did in class. In class I was just like rushing through everything, but so hopefully if you have any questions, feel free to just like ask me, email me, or whatever.